I'm Jamie Beebe.
And I'm Jake Deptula. We're the host of Strictly Stalking,
a weekly true crime podcast exploring true stalking stories from survivors in their own words.
We cover unique stalking cases through interviews with stalking survivors, advocates, and experts.
Strictly Stalking has been praised by survivors, advocates, listeners, and media for raising awareness about the dangerously underreported and often fatal crime of stalking.
Our series continues to provide a vital platform for stalking survivors to share their stories.
And provides anti-stalking resources for listeners along with important tips on how friends, family, and law enforcement can support stalking survivors.
Please listen now wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode of the Creep Street Podcast is brought to you by Martini Coffee Roasters. You know, people always look at me weird when I say I start off every morning with a big old martini. But then I set them straight, and I tell them I'm talking about Martini Coffee Roasters coffee. A delicious coffee made by the Martini family. They roast their coffee using a traditional method of sight and sound to roast those little babies to perfection. And they also sell green coffee beans for those home roasters out there. And right now, fans of the Creep Street Podcast can get 20% off their entire order by using the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Once again, for 20% off your order, use the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Martini Coffee Roasters, the perfect coffee to keep you creeps caffeinated.
You've taken a wrong turn down Creep Street.
Citizens of the Milky Way, this is Maureen Bogey.
And I'm Dylan Hackworth.
And you have landed smack dab in the middle of Creep Street Podcast.
Incoming! Boom! Creep Street.
Whoa, that was crazy. Citizens, welcome. We are so happy to have you with us here today. It is a true blessing and a pleasure to be spreading the good word of Creep Street to you all today.
Yes.
Please remember to like, rate, subscribe, tell a friend, leave a review, tell a family member, anything like that. It really helps out the show big time.
Oh yeah, it's a big help in ways you can't even fathom.
And just, we appreciate it so much, and keep doing what you're doing.
Please, absolutely.
To be kept up on what we're doing, feel free to follow us on Instagram at Creep Street Podcast, Twitter, we're at Creep Street Pod. We have a Facebook, and on our Facebook, we have a subgroup called Citizens of the Milky Way. We highly recommend you go ahead and check that out. It's just a forum where anyone can share memes, reviews, funny stories, scary stories, anything like that. We highly recommend that you go ahead and check that out.
Yes, please.
And we've been getting the vibe lately that one episode a week is just not enough.
Oh, we've been getting that vibe. People have been saying, give us more of that street, baby.
The good news is we have a solution to your woes. It is at patreon.com/creepstreetpodcast. There we have all sorts of bonus content. We have movie reviews, movie commentaries, short stories, full bonus episodes, and everything and anything in between.
Oh. My God, it's a buffet of creepiness.
It is. We have 3 tiers. We have $2 a month, $5 a month, and $10 a month. Each tier gets bonus content. So no matter what you're given, you're getting back, baby.
That's right, baby.
So feel free to check that out at patreon.com/creepstreetpodcast.
Oh, yeah.
Now, last week we went down to good old Oklahoma.
That's right. Wow, people loved that episode.
Yes, thank you to everyone who downloaded, who shared it, who talked about it, who left us a review about it. We really appreciate it, and we're so happy that you all enjoyed it so much. It was such an interesting case and such a weird case.
Yes, it sure was. It was so bizarre. People really latched onto it.
If you haven't listened to it yet, we recommend that you do. It's just been a popular ep, baby.
And I just want to give a quick shout out to the Strictly Stalking podcast. You might have heard at the beginning of the episode, there's an ad for their show. They're also running Creep Street promos in the front of their episode. Very cool people, very cool show. Each week they have an actual guest, a survivor of stalking, to tell their story. Very incredible stuff, but they've been sharing our stuff.
So if we have any new listeners coming over from that podcast, welcome.
Welcome.
We're so happy to have you.
And I'm sure hopefully some of ours have gone over and had gotten a little taste of Strictly Stalking.
Yes, please.
But Maureen, you're right though. This Jameson episode, it was big.
It was big. But this week we have another mystery.
This is what you would call an American classic.
Yes.
This is one. Get your burgers, get your hot dogs, get your fries,
get your Ford,
get some firecrackers, because this is an all-American classic, folks. Should I just tell them?
I think the good word needs to be spread, yeah.
Today we are talking about Encounter in Kelly-Hopkinsville. Yes. Now, let me just base this turkey with my sources.
Please.
Only one main source this week, a book called The Kelly-Hopkinsville UFO and Alien Shootout by George Dudding.
Yes. Very excited about this episode. This episode and this topic is one that, if you haven't heard of it before, once we do this episode, it's one of those things that once you hear this episode, you're gonna see it all over the place.
It's gonna pop up everywhere.
You'll be like, oh, that thing.
Exactly. Great way to put it, Maureen. That's exactly. If you weren't conscious of it now, you're suddenly gonna realize you've been conscious of it for a while.
Yes.
Sort of thing. Yeah. Very fascinating story. In fact, this month, this August, will mark the 67th anniversary of this very strange encounter.
Oh, wow.
Well, let's start off with a little bit of background about the area and the family that our story concerns.
Okay.
So this all went down on a hot and humid night on Sunday, August 21st, 1955. And at this time in 1955, the town of Kelly, Kentucky, had a small population of only 150 people. More like a village than a town, really. The family at the center of our story was the family of Mrs. Glennie Mae Sutton Langford. She was a widow of Oscar Langford. Her second husband, her first husband, was a man named Tillman Sutton. She was your classic God-fearing woman who grew up in what is commonly referred to as the Bible Belt. Kelly, Kentucky is located in western Kentucky, and while western Kentucky, I guess, is not technically part of what is known as Appalachia, much of the folklore and customs are shared by the folks in western Kentucky regardless.
Appalachia adjacent, we'll say.
Absolutely. And the locals, especially back then, tended to have a strong belief in the supernatural. Well, Glennie Mae lived in a quaint farmhouse located along Old Madisonville Road, State Route 41, on a property called Gaither McGee. On the night that all this craziness went down, Glennie Mae happened to have a lot of company. There were 11 folks at the house that night, consisting of both family and friends, and for the sake of thoroughness, here's a little rundown of everyone who was at the house that night. Of course, Glennie Mae Langford, age 50, her son, Lonnie Langford, age 12, her daughter, Charlton Langford, age 10, her daughter, Mary Langford, age 7, her son, Elmer Lucky Sutton, age 25, her son, John Charlie, or J.C. Sutton, age 21, Elmer Sutton's wife, Vera Sutton, age 29, J.C. Sutton's wife, Eileen Sutton, aged 27, Eileen Sutton's brother, O.P. Baker, age 30, Elmer Sutton's friend, Billy Ray Taylor, age 21, and Billy Ray's wife, June Taylor, age 18. So it was a house full.
Yeah, a lot of people in one house.
They had kids there too, so this is kind of a wide range of ages, you know what I mean, that are all crammed in this house together. And so, but couldn't help but thinking how nice this must be for Glennie Mae. You know, she's a widowed woman, but surrounded by her children and friends. So what a nice, just a nice little picture. It reminds me of like Little House on the Prairie or something, you know?
Yeah.
Well, the Taylors, as I said, were friends of the Suttons, and they were visiting from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Billy Ray and his wife June were actually co-workers, and they worked for Elmer and Vera Sutton, working as traveling carnival workers.
Oh.
In fact, Elmer had acquired the nickname Lucky due to his knack for winning carnival games, even when they were rigged.
Oh.
He was still able to, I guess, do it. He had that touch. He had the touch.
Yes, good for Lucky.
Yeah. Well, carnivals were all the rage at this time. It was post-World War II, and the American economy was booming and folks had extra cash to spare. Hence the name, and people also started having babies, hence the name baby boomers.
There you
generation.
go.
Yeah. And because of all this extra cash people had, entertainment, like traveling carnivals were big business. Let's also take into consideration of the era we're talking about here. It's 1955, and the wildness of Roswell had only happened 8 years earlier in 1947, which we covered in episode 100, obviously. Well, UFOs were all the rage in popular culture, and they were all over movies, TV, pulp novels. And let's not forget another topic we covered, the Flatwoods Monster and UFO, which happened in West Virginia in September of 1952, not far from Kentucky, of course. So now, let's go to the night in question. As I said, it was a hot, sultry evening on Sunday, August 21st, 1955. And that night at the home of Glennie Mae, it was packed with the Langfords, the Suttons, and the Taylors all having a good time. They talked, they laughed, they played cards, told fun tales. It was an excellent night of friends and family. The younger kids were running around the house, playing games of their own, and they had already eaten dinner and the dishes were cleaned and put away. And most of the women, they were in the kitchen, sitting at the table, chatting while the men were doing their own thing.
Classic.
This was the kind of night you'd want to break out some of that famous Kentucky moonshine. But of course, Glennie Mae was a devout religious woman and wouldn't have any of that in her house, of course.
Oh, no.
The source says she also didn't allow any cussing or filthy talk.
Oh.
Well, Billy Ray entered the kitchen. He was looking for something to drink. And of course, Glennie Mae's humble country home didn't have running water, so water had to be fetched like from a pump water spout. Glennie Mae happily told Billy Ray to grab the water bucket and help himself to the well. Well, that's what he did. Bucket in hand, Billy Ray headed out the back door of the home and headed to the spot where the spout was. He set the bucket down and begins pumping it, and after a few moments, a stream of cool, fresh water emerged and began to fill the bucket. Well, it's about 7 p.m., and Billy Ray is standing at the spout as the bucket's being filled, and that's when some sort of motion in the sky caught Billy Ray's eye, and he looked up in the sky. Now, a quick side note the source makes that I did not know. At this time in 1955, there was no daylight savings time in effect. So, if there had been, it would have actually been about 8 p.m. The sunset that night was at 7:36 p.m., so it was dark out. Looking up in the sky, Billy Ray witnessed what appeared to be a streak of bright light shooting across the sky from the southwest, heading in the direction of the farmhouse. As the strange light got closer, Billy Ray was shocked to see that it was a large disc-like object in the sky. From the back emanated light of multiple colors, and there was a clear hissing sound in the air. The object was now at a low altitude, and Billy Ray watched in awe as the object shot over the farmhouse, across several fields, and over a nearby tree line. From where Billy Ray was standing, it appeared the strange bright craft had quietly set down in a low ravine that was part of a sagebrush field. And wherever it had landed, Billy Ray could see what seemed like a glowing light. Like everyone else in the world, Billy Ray had been hearing about all these recent UFO sightings, and so he dashed back off to the house to tell everyone what he had just witnessed. So here we go. How many times has our story started like this?
Oh, yeah. Many a time. Many a time.
Buckle up, folks. It's about to get wild. Of course, Billy Ray comes blazing into the house, ranting and raving about a strange craft in the sky. The entire family stopped, dead in shock, and listened to his story. But Elmer Sutton, old Lucky, he was not so quick to buy what Billy Ray was talking about, telling him, "Billy Ray, have you gone plumb crazy?"
Oh, gosh.
Of course, Billy Ray was adamant that he had just seen one of these flying saucers that everyone's talking about. Not only that, Billy Ray was saying they needed to go down there and see what the heck this thing was. But Elmer Sutton was not about to go on a wild goose chase and refused to go. The two apparently had a rather heated exchange and needed to cool off a bit afterward. The rest of the group were convinced that Billy Ray was just freaking out over a shooting star. Angry, Billy Ray took a seat and mumbled to himself for a while, and the family got back to whatever it was they were doing before. But the whole family was soon going to realize that Billy Ray had truly seen something strange. It was going to be a night they would never forget. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. A huge night. A huge night in the history of the weird.
Yes, absolutely. About an hour passed, and the family was settled down into various activities, some chatting, some playing cards, etc. Well, that's when they heard the sound of their dogs barking wildly outside the farmhouse. At first, the family just paid it no mind because, hey, every now and then the dogs would bark if they heard something or saw an animal, you know. But their barking only intensified. Well, it got to the point that both Elmer and Billy Ray decided they had to go out and see what all this commotion was about. Maybe there was someone trespassing, you don't know. They stepped outside, and as they did, they saw the dogs come running to the house. They were clearly terrified, and they actually ran and crawled under the house in fear, like under the porch.
Right, yeah.
Well, Elmer and Billy Ray are like, what the heck is this all about? But that's when something in the darkness caught their eye. Someone or something was approaching the house. Elmer and Billy Ray peered into the darkness, trying to get a good look at whatever this thing was. And to their horror, whatever they were looking at was a creature neither of them had ever seen before. Both men rushed back into the house and headed to their guns. J.C. Sutton was the owner of the guns in the house that night. J.C. armed himself with a 20-gauge single-barrel shotgun. Elmer grabbed a double-barrel 12-gauge, which is serious fucking business.
Yeah.
And Billy Ray grabbed the .22 caliber rifle, a much more modest choice. The three men then stepped outside and beheld a creature, maybe 3 to 4 feet tall. Its head was very large in proportion to the rest of its body, and its ears seemed to be pointed. It had large, round eyes that seemed to be almost at the sides of its head, and they glowed with a strange yellow color. In fact, it seemed the whole body glowed as if it were wearing some sort of a bright, metallic suit. Its arms were long and hanged almost down to the ground, and its hands were webbed and had what appeared to be claws on the tips of its fingers. Its legs were short, but the freakiest of all, these little legs didn't seem to actually touch the ground. It was almost as if it floated above the ground. Well, Glennie Mae is standing in the doorway just behind the men, and they all watched as this thing got closer, and as it did, it actually raised its hands into the air. Now, Glennie Mae would later say that it seemed as if the creature was trying to signal that it meant no harm. And she said that to the boys. She said, I think this thing is trying to say it has no ill intention, but that didn't matter. The men stepped out into the yard, and when the creature had gotten to about 20 feet away, JC and Billy Ray pumped several rounds into this creature.
Oh, God.
When the bullets hit the creature, it made a sound similar to what you would think if you were to shoot like a metal bucket. It had like a metallic sound. Well, the force of these shots sent the creature careening backwards head over heels, but to their horror, it immediately stood upright once again. Then the creature fled from the house into the darkness, and according to the source, its body made a very peculiar motion while it ran. As we know, it almost seemed to hover above the ground, and the motion seemed to come from its hips rather than its legs. Like it was like rotating back and forth almost. From what I understand, it was as if it made a rotating motion with the hips, sort of.
Right.
Elmer and Billy Ray stayed outside for another 5 minutes, watching for any sign of the creature in the dark. And once it seemed like it had left, the two returned back inside. So wow, that's our first glimpse of the creature. The little, it's kind of your, I don't know, I'm not sure specifically where the trope comes from, but you'll see later people started to refer to these things as little green men. You always hear the phrase, oh, little green men.
Right.
It kind of, I don't know if it comes from this, but it certainly cemented that sort of cliche of what we think of as space aliens, little green men. Obviously, we know that from the stories we've covered, they come in all shapes and sizes. Back inside, everyone was in a huff about what was going on. Glennie Mae had all the kids go hide under their beds for cover, and all the women were taking refuge in various parts of the house. After a few minutes of thinking that it was all over, they all came out of their hiding places and gathered in the living room to talk about what the heck had just happened. All of a sudden, to their shock, one of the creatures popped up in the window, peering inside, causing everyone to scream and jump back in horror. Without hesitation, JC lifted the barrel of his 20-gauge shotgun and blasted the creature right through the window screen from a distance of only about 2 feet.
Oh my God.
Billy Ray likewise fired through the window with his .22 caliber rifle. Wondering if they had finally killed the thing, Elmer and Billy Ray ran outside to check. That's something you're going to notice. It doesn't matter if they're outside or inside. These boys are going to fire.
They're going to shoot.
They're going to pull that trigger, baby. Elmer went out the door first, dashing off the porch and into the yard. Billy Ray was just about to step off the porch himself to follow when the family behind him screamed. A clawed hand was reaching down from the roof above the porch and tried to grab Billy Ray by the hair. They grabbed Billy Ray and pulled him back into the house before the thing could grab him. In the yard, Elmer raised his 12-gauge shotgun. This is the big boy. This is the 12-gauge double barrel.
Right.
That's a fat-ass shotgun. If you've ever heard one go off, you fucking know it. It's a loud motherfucker. Elmer raised the barrel of the 12-gauge shotgun and hit the creature with a blast so hard, it sent the creature rocketing up and over the roof like a ramp. It went like boom, like it was like a, like someone on a skateboard going up a ramp. Billy Ray ran back outside to see the thing for himself when another movement elsewhere in the yard caught his eye. Up in a maple tree, he saw another one of these silver-clad, shining creatures. Both him and Elmer took aim and shot the thing, but instead of falling flat to the ground, it almost seemed to float on its way down. And then it took off with its hip-swaying motion, ran away into the dark. So it hit it, but instead of falling, it's like it gently floated down to the ground.
What the hell is going on?
Weird, right? So Elmer and Billy Ray chased the thing into the dark, firing as they went. And this thing moved fast enough that it left them in the dust. Out there in the dark, the two searched for a couple minutes when another one of these creatures poked its head out from around the side of the farmhouse. Once again, Elmer shot it, and it made a strange metallic sound, and as always, the thing just hopped back up and ran away. Now it's starting to dawn on them that they aren't just dealing with one creature, but multiple.
Yeah.
For the time being, all was silent, or at least they would be for about 20 minutes. There were some electric lights on a cord that hung down from the porch that the family had now turned on, giving them at least a little bit of light. The family was now even more worried as it seemed these things were impervious to their weaponry.
Yeah, this is so scary.
I know, right? Once again, one of the creatures appeared on the roof, and Elmer and Billy Ray were able to scare it off with gunfire. It floated down from the roof and then seemed to perch on a fence about 40 feet away. And once again, the creature was hit with a blast and then just scurried away into the dark. They're persistent little motherfuckers.
They really are.
After some relative quiet, the two men returned back into the house. The children were still hiding under their beds. All the while, they could hear strange noises outside, like scratching on the walls and the roof. Glennie Mae happened to be looking out the window when she shouted that another one of these things was approaching the front door. She would later describe the thing, saying it looked like a shiny silver 5-gallon kerosene can with a head attached to it and skinny little legs beneath it. Billy Ray threw the door open and sent a blast right through the screen door, hitting the thing. And just like every time before, the thing was temporarily stunned, but then got up and ran away. Later estimates would guess that there were as many as 12 to 15 of these things, but it's also possible it could have just been 2. They're not for sure, because according to Glennie Mae, whenever they would approach, they seemed to do so one at a time. So they've never been sure of the true number.
Right.
Because they only approached one at a time.
Weird.
As the night wore on, the family was growing more and more concerned. They were going through a lot of ammo, and not to mention causing a lot of damage to the house by constantly shooting it.
This is another classic case of if you don't know what it is, shoot at it.
Shoot it. Even if you're in your own fucking house, just blast the whole thing apart if you have to. By 11 o'clock, the siege had been going on for about 3 hours. As it didn't seem like the creature had no intention of stopping, they all decided to make a break for it and go get help. They all grabbed whatever belongings they could and ran outside to their vehicles. Together they drove 8 miles south to the police station in Hopkinsville. They all rushed into the station and told the police what was going on. The UFO in the sky, the creatures, the gun battle. In all, Billy Ray alone apparently went through about 4 boxes of ammo, which comes out to about 200 bullets.
Oh my God.
And that was just Billy Ray. The police were, of course, stupefied by their story and Whether or not they personally believed in extraterrestrials, it was clear the family was in a genuine state of fear, and they believed they had certainly seen something. Chief of Police Russell Greenwell of Hopkinsville and Deputy Sheriff George Batts of Christian County were the ones to gather the information from the family, and they phoned in for backup, telling them to bring extra arms just in case. So in total, 17 law enforcement officers arrived at the farmhouse that night. Some were even military police from Fort Campbell, as well as state troopers. In fact, one of the state troopers who was en route to the farmhouse claimed to have witnessed 2 UFOs in the sky near the Shady Oaks restaurant about 3 miles north of Hopkinsville. So as he's responding, he sees UFOs.
Wow. What the fuck is going on?
I have no idea. He claimed they flew over his car and made a whining sound while traveling in an arc-shaped path. Some theorized that perhaps these were the craft returning to pick up the creatures after dropping them off. By now, press and media had gotten word of the story, and shortly, 4 folks from the Kentucky New Era newspaper had arrived. They were Harvey Reeder, his wife, Joe Doris, and Thomas Covington. In addition to them were 2 men from the Hopkinsville radio station, WHOP, and news reporter Frank Cameron, and the radio announcer and engineer Andrew B. Ledwith. So this is pretty quick that media is getting on to this.
Yeah.
By about 12:30 a.m., between law enforcement and the media, it's believed there were about 25 people at the farmhouse that night, not including the actual family. The first thing they did was to make sure that none of the family had been intoxicated, which it was quick and easy to tell that they hadn't been, especially since Glennie Mae didn't approve of drinking. Next, law enforcement thoroughly searched the property for any sign of the creatures. At the very least, they hoped to find footprints, but as we know, these creatures almost seem to hover above the ground, so there was not a track in sight. But one thing was for certain. The family had certainly been shooting at something. Screens on the door and that window had been blown open, as well as parts of the house being riddled with bullets. Shell casings were everywhere in the house and in the yard. One of the few weird things they did find, however, was what the source described as a glowing, luminous strain in the grass, close to where the creature had perched on the fence. However, no one thought to take a sample of the luminous stuff for testing, of course.
Yeah, classic.
In all, the police were there for about 2 hours that night, but were unable to find any signs of these alien creatures. They interviewed a neighbor who said they had heard the gunshots, but just thought maybe they were firecrackers or something. The chief of police did say, though, that there was an eerie feeling in the air that night. And even if what the family had encountered were not actually extraterrestrials, they certainly saw something that upset them. Well, the family was given a bit of time to catch their breath. By about 2 a.m., law enforcement and media had all left, and some of the police said they would return in the morning once the sun was up to continue their search in case there was something they missed. The family was absolutely exhausted from the night they had, and hesitantly, they all decided to try and go to bed. However, most of them were all shaken up and were unable to fall asleep at all. Glennie Mae was one in particular who wasn't able to fall asleep. It was about 3:30 a.m. when she started to hear what she thought sounded like scratching coming from above her on the roof. Terrified, Glennie Mae tried to quietly call out to the rest of the family to stir them awake. But before anyone responded, she saw 2 brightly glowing eyes peering in through the window. Elmer was still awake, and he had his shotgun loaded and ready to go. He entered into the room where Glennie Mae was, and remember, Glennie Mae felt whatever these things were, they didn't mean any harm. By some accounts, she had even asked Elmer not to shoot, but Elmer disregarded her request and fired a blast right through her bedroom window.
Oh my God.
Through the glass, hitting the creature, sending it flying backwards into the yard. And for roughly the next 2 hours, the family had to ward off several incursions by these creatures, shooting them in the yard, off the roof, etc. It was about 5:15 a.m. when the excitement finally wound down. The following morning, some of the police came back to search a bit more, as they said they would. Elmer, JC, and Billy Ray, among others, had already left for the day. They were going to get a truck to help Glennie Mae move to a nicer home over in Hopkinsville. She had actually always expressed an interest in moving, but after the events of the previous night, it certainly expedited the situation. The farm itself was really not that large. It was just the house and just a few acres of simple tobacco farming land. A Sergeant Frank Dudas from the Hopkinsville City Police was not actually ever there at the scene, but said he could believe it, as he and 2 other fellow policemen had seen what they described as 3 flying saucers in the sky one morning in the summer of 1954, just the year previous. Of course, the place became swamped with press and curious thrill seekers. Newspapers throughout the country were writing about this weird encounter in rural Kentucky. In the coming years, the Kelly-Hopkinsville case would come to be known by many names. The Kelly-Hopkinsville encounter, the Hopkinsville Goblin case, and even the Kelly Green Man case. It would be investigated, and the family would be interviewed by several highly respected UFO investigators, including Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who we've talked about before from Northwestern University, who famously served as a consultant to the United States Air Force for their Project Blue Book. It's said the family's story remained the same over time, and many believe they were telling the truth. So, why don't we talk about theories?
Let's dive in, because I want to know what's going on with these little fuckers.
Oh yeah, me too. So, George Dudding, in his book that I use as a source, he lists some theories that I thought were interesting, and I'm just going to read them verbatim from the source, and then we'll discuss them.
Great.
The first, one we've heard before, owls.
Yes, so weird. We've talked about this on Patreon.
Yes.
But I don't know if we've talked about it a lot on this show, so I'm excited to get into this theory.
Yes. Here's what he writes. The aliens were actually a pair of great horned owls that were near the Sutton house that evening, and they were searching for food to feed their young. Experts claim that they would have attacked anyone who got in their way. This theory has problems because it seems that the shotgun blast would have left behind a dead owl or its feathers. So very true.
Yes.
If they keep shooting these fuckers and they keep getting up, that's probably not an owl.
Right. But that is a theory with a lot of alien encounters, is like people are actually seeing owls.
Right. The Flatwoods Monster was thought maybe to be an owl, which is obviously happened, like I said at the beginning, not too far from the Kelly-Hopkinsville area.
Yeah. In that, it seems pretty crazy, but if you look at certain owls, their eye shape can kind of lend itself to the alien eye situation.
Yeah, absolutely. They kind of do have an alien look about them, just like alien in terms of just the trope of what we think of aliens. You
right,
know,
like
the
a gray
big head.
yeah.
Right.
Even if you look at pictures or like a drawing of an owl, like a simple drawing of an owl,
right,
it's really similar to how you would simply draw an alien.
Yeah.
So maybe there's something there. I don't know.
Right. The next theory, meteors. The UFO was actually a meteor, or rocky metallic body from space, which entered the atmosphere and heated up due to friction with the air. It would have then left a streak of light in its path. This is commonly referred to as a shooting star. This claim does not explain the presence of these strange creatures or aliens, which is true. It's like a meteor's not going to, knock on your window and...
Yeah, what's the deal with these damn fucking goblins?
Right. Maybe it explains the light, the whatever thing Billy Ray saw at first, but it doesn't explain these little fuckers trying to get in the door.
Right.
The next theory, of course, a hoax. The incident was a hoax created by the Suttons and Taylors. Because the Suttons and Taylors worked for carnivals, they were considered capable of creating such a story. This does not make sense because these people were not the type of people to make up stories, according to the people who knew them. The police were pretty sure that they were serious people. Besides, Glennie Langford would not have gone along with such claims.
And I think also this family, they really didn't like all of the attention that it brought to them.
No, they left. That she moved out. Yeah, they didn't like it at all. Some of the men, like Elmer, I think, and like Billy Ray, talked to the press. But yeah, like Glennie Mae was not having any of this shit.
Yeah.
And why would she go along with it? You know what I mean?
Right.
Next theory, this is interesting. Monkeys.
Monkeys?
The aliens were monkeys that had been painted silver and had escaped from a traveling circus. This sounds preposterous because no silver monkeys had been reported missing, and their dead bodies would have been strewn all about the premises. Once again, keep in mind, even if these were monkeys, a shotgun blast is going to kill it.
Right.
The next theory, alcohol.
Oh, no.
The witnesses had been drinking beer or moonshine and imagined the whole event. There has been no evidence of this claim, and the police stated that these people were not under the influence. And once again, as we know, Glennie Mae was not for drinking.
Right, and also alcohol isn't a hallucinogen.
Right. I've never drank, and thought, it's so weird.
It's not going to make you see things that aren't there like that.
Right. Next theory, kids.
Uh-oh.
Local kids dressed in costumes and masks peered in the windows, climbed on roofs, and climbed in trees. Can you imagine such a thing? They would have been killed by all that gunfire, and bodies would have been lying all around, which is true. Once again, like the animals, if it was kids, then these kids are fucking impervious to bullets, for Christ's sake.
Yeah. Kind of, it's the same thing as with the owls and the monkeys. It's like...
Right.
Interesting theories, but then how did they not get shot?
Absolutely. The next theory, foxfire. The luminous green spot near the fence was foxfire, which is caused by a type of bioluminescent fungus growing on decaying wood. During the process, a chemical reaction involving an enzyme releases a greenish, glowing light. Investigators should have collected samples of this during their investigation, but did not. However, foxfire does not explain the alien attack. Once again, interesting thing, because that's something that you forget about, that's a real naturally occurring phenomenon that is fascinating. But once again, some of these things explain the shit in the sky.
Right.
But they don't explain the things they were able to fucking shoot over and over.
Right.
You know, that's the thing. Everything that they've presented might explain the things in the sky, but don't explain these little creatures.
Yes.
And of course, finally, UFO aliens.
Yeah.
The final theory, which seems to fit the bill, is that some type of extraterrestrial or interdimensional craft piloted by alien life forms appeared in the Kelly community that night and landed in the hollow below the Sutton farmhouse. They came to the farmhouse and conducted their own exploration of the people living there. They did not expect to receive such a hostile welcome, but may not have realized that being blasted with guns was a hostile activity. They may have thought it was fun. In fact, the Kelly victims may be lucky that those aliens did not go to their ship and return with some weapons of their own and join up in the fun. Which I thought was kind of interesting, because we know that apparently it said that this creature raised its arms as if to say, don't shoot. But then when they started shooting, I like the idea of maybe they thought it was a game.
Right.
It does sound like they didn't intend them any harm. It does sound like they were playing, doesn't it?
Kind of, yeah, because they never really like full on attacked or anything like that.
And even like the thing reaching down to touch Billy Ray's hair almost seems playful.
Yeah.
Like it's you know what I mean? Like a cat batting, you know what I mean? It seems very playful in nature.
And the reason why just these things are called goblins a lot of the time, and like they are not thought to be like goblins from like fairy tales necessarily. It's like
right.
Just these things are just short, weird creatures.
And that's what the source says, that not goblins in what we think of, just goblins because of their just weird appearance. And also, they say little green men, but in fact, the creatures, there's nothing that says them being green. Now, I guess Billy Ray or one of the guys, JC, said that the metallic things they were wearing might have had a faint greenish tint to them. But there's nothing to indicate that the creatures themselves were green.
Right. This is a really interesting story that has come up a lot during a lot of different kind of paranormal investigations and things like that. And we've talked about Hellier, this great paranormal series, docu-series.
We've been doing a kind of a discussion of that on our Patreon, which is ongoing. We did season 1. We got to get the season 2 out there. We'll do that this month.
Yeah, and that's kind of this story, the Kelly-Hopkinsville case, really is at the center of the whole Hellier case. And it's interesting. It's like, does the caves have something to do with this? Because there's the Mammoth cave system in Kentucky.
That's what a lot of people wonder, if maybe what was in the sky was unrelated to the creatures. Maybe it was just a shooting star in the sky or something. Maybe these creatures had come from below, come from the cave systems.
Yes. It's definitely possible.
Because there's so much lore surrounding the caves. And yeah, a very fascinating thing to think about.
Absolutely. Well, Dylan, thank you so much for doing all of this fantastic research.
Of course, my pleasure, my pleasure.
And if you guys have any theories, thoughts, questions, anything like that, feel free to reach out to us on any of our socials, or you can email us at creepstreetpodcast@gmail.com.
Well, I got a list of names I wouldn't mind peeking through my windows.
Please.
Folks, the names of our top-tier Patreon subscribers: of course, the Dream James Watkins, the Finished Face Via Lungfus, the Madman Marcus Hall, the Vivacious Vicky McHugh, the Tenacious Teresa Hackworth, the Heartbreak Kid Chris Hackworth, the Oh-So-Suave Sean Richardson, the British Bone Breaker Bex Martin, the Notorious Nicholas Barker, the Terrifying Taylor Lashmet, the Count of Cool Cameron Corliss, the Archduke of Attitude Adam Archer, the Sinister Sam Geiger, the Nightmare of New Zealand Noeline Vivilli, the Loathsome Johnny Love, the Carnivorous Kevin Bogey, the Killer Stud Sid Carl Staub, the Firestarter Heather Carter, the Conqueror Christopher Damian Damaris, the Awfully Awesome Annie, the Murderous Maggie Leach, the Sir of Sexy Sam Hackworth, the Evil Elizabeth Riley, Lauren Hellfire Hernandez Lopez, the Maniacal Laura Maynard, the Vicious Karen Van Buren, the arch-nemesis Aaron Bird, the sadistic Sergio Castillo, the rapscallion Ryan Crum, the Beast Benjamin Huang, the devilish Chris Doucette, and the Psycho Sam.
Incredible, incredible stuff. Thank you so much to all of our top-tier Patreon subscribers. We are so grateful to have you, and thank you for all that you do to support the podcast.
Absolutely. Of course, like, rate, subscribe, tell your friends, your family, your loved ones. Hit us with the 5 stars on, or whatever the equivalent is on whatever you listen to us on, and take care of yourselves out there.
Please enjoy. Just have a great August, you know.
Absolutely.
I mean, enjoy the dog days of summer, as it were.
Because, folks, in a couple of months, it's October, baby.
It's going to be October before you know it.
Before you know it.
If you have any suggestions on what you'd like to see during our October, or, you know, our ding-dang, slammin', home run, slam-a-rammer, I don't know what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah.
But, or October time, you know what I'm saying. If you have any
yeah.
suggestions for that, feel free to reach out to us at creepstreetpodcast@gmail.com.
Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
I'm Maureen Bogey.
Good night and goodbye.
Goodbye.